Come join us in Safaga for a one-day cruise excursion to Luxor, but where our own tour arrangements don't go quite to plan, but still get to see the Temple of Karnak and then onto the Valley of the Kings, where having our own independent guide was invaluable to decide whether the upcharged tombs were worth paying for, and finished by squeezing in an extra stop to a standard itinerary with the Temple of Hatshepsut. But can you really see the highlights of Luxor in one day? Come with us to find out. You join us just after dawn as we arrive in Safaga, the cruise port gateway to Luxor and Valley of the Kings. Having sailed the previous day from port side south through the Suez Canal. A truly unique experience which you can check out in our previous video, and one of the biggest reasons we booked this cruise itinerary.
So here we are at Safaga Port, the Valley of the Kings in Luxor, and I'm pleased to say, compared to the chaos of portside, this is all very orderly. So hopefully we won't get stuck there for an hour like we did up in Cairo.
Though having made our own excursion arrangements due to a tight itinerary must have tempted fate with the hope of an early departure.
So the joys and risk of not taking a cruise line set itinerary. Very simply, most of the tours were doing the Valley of the Kings. They were also doing Karnak Temple. However, they were not going to Hatshepsut Temple, which is what we really wanted to see as well. Bottom line is we've booked a private tour, private driver through a reputable company. We paid the pass to get them into the port as well, and to get us back here quickly later on, which is about another $50 to do so, and the driver should have been in the compound waiting with a sign for us. He's not here. We were a little late coming off the ship, but he was parked 10 minutes outside, said he would be here, you know, in that time. That was probably a good 45 minutes ago, so we're now an hour behind schedule. We've got very little time. We've got to be back on the ship by 8:30 latest today, so yeah, hasn't really gone to plan this morning.
So the cruise port had actually lost the driver's permit, so after an hour resolving, headed off for the 6-hour round trip to Luxor. All of which left us with even less time on an already packed itinerary. So headed to our first scheduled stop of Karnak Temple, where we met our private guide and Egyptologist, Mustafa. Now, we also would have loved to have visited Luxor Temple, which can be found at the opposite end of this avenue of sphinxes. But given our tight schedule, had to prioritise just one, so chose Karnak as the larger of the two sites, spanning some 200 acres. Now, this was always going to be the compromise, visiting on a single day cruise excursion. And so many incredible historic sites, you could easily fill a dedicated trip just to fit them all in. Regrettably though, we really wish the cruise line had scheduled an optional overnight excursion in Luxor. They had done this at our previous stop at port side, giving us ample time to explore Cairo. So make sure you follow our series to check out our previous videos, where we visited the mosques and bazaars of historic old Cairo, see the treasures of Tutankhamum at the original Egyptian Museum, and visit the new Grand Egyptian Museum, and visit the Sphinx and Pyramids of both Giza and Safaga. Though having Mustafa all to ourselves really helped maximise our time, skipping by the larger group tours and moving at our own pace. We were able to freely ask questions and, most importantly, hear the answers, plus impart his extensive knowledge to us. For instance, why do people walk around this scarab beetle? Which was 3 times for good luck, 7 for marriage, and 9 for children. So just make sure you get it right. He was also able to take us to quieter and more obscure corners of the temple, which would have been impractical with a larger group tour, showing us how subsequent pharaohs pillaged the sites of their predecessors and even tried to eradicate their legacy from history. Now, you might naturally assume it would be far more expensive having this level of personal attention from a private guide, not to mention the comfort of having your own private vehicle and driver. Though astonishingly, we were able to source this independently for the same cost as the official group cruise excursion, but also include additional itinerary elements. So check out our previous Cairo videos to see how we did this, as used the same company in Luxor as well. So finishing up our tour of the temple with a fitting finale, the highlight of the site has to be the great Hatshepsut Hall with its 134 columns towering 70 feet into the air. So leaving Karnak Temple, we had originally planned to squeeze in a lunch on a felucca on the Nile. However, given that we were behind schedule given the delays at the port in the morning, we opted to skip food to get us back on track, crossing over the River Nile to the west bank to the next highlight on our itinerary, the iconic Valley of the Kings. So like at Karnak, we passed through the visitor centre for the security check and to get our bearings on the site, before buggies ferry you down to the tombs themselves. Now at both sites, vendors and traders were restricted to market stalls outside the welcome centre and were not allowed to freely roam the sites. A pleasant surprise compared to the stark contrast of our experience at the pyramids with the pushy sellers. Though again, having a private guide means you are going to be less hassled. Having Mustafa was invaluable, helping to prioritise which tombs to visit, choosing between those included in general admission and those carrying an upcharge. So taking his advice, we opted to start with the most expensive upgrade tomb, the combined tomb of Ramesses V and VI. However, due to the similar names, all tombs carry an identifying code, in this case KV9. Now I'll put links in the description as always to the official site where you can book your tickets in advance. However, admission to the Valley of the Kings was 750 Egyptian pounds, so about $16 or £11 sterling, and includes access to 3 of the general admission tombs. Now, being one of the more impressive tombs, the upcharge for this was 2,000 Egyptian pounds, so about $42 or £30 sterling. But as you will see, this tomb was exceptionally quiet in contrast to the next one we visited, which was general admission. Though do bear in mind, the quieter the tomb, the more likely the attendants are to encourage you to give them a tip for taking photos. This is less of an issue in the busier tombs, however do come prepared with some small change as, let's be honest, it's a small price to pay. Now in comparison, we next headed to Ramesses IV, or KV2, and as you can see was a complete bottleneck at the entrance to get in. And once inside it was a similar story, so will be more challenging if you are looking to take photos without people walking into shot or video without a lot of background noise, which is where the extra paid tombs are really worth the investment. And given our long transfer time from Safaga, this was compounded that we were visiting at the busiest time of the day. So much like our experience at the pyramids, if possible, I would visit first thing in the morning to avoid the crowds. And if considering visiting Luxor, I would definitely do as an extended stay, allowing you to visit more tombs at quieter times and be less rushed, plus take in the other temples such as Luxor and their impressive sound and light experience at night, or even take in a hot air balloon ride over the Valley of the Kings at dawn. Now, given the legacy of the historic find of the treasures of Tutankhamun, you would expect his tomb to be one of the most popular. And even given that the upcharge is quite modest at 220 Egyptian pounds, so $5 or £3 sterling, the tomb itself was very quiet during our visit, which is just as well, for as the boy king died so young unexpectedly, his tomb is relatively modest, but where you can find his mummified remains laid at rest. Though it might be that the number of tickets available are restricted, so would definitely need to be booked in advance if wanting to guarantee seeing his tomb. And lastly, due to time pressure, we opted not to visit our third included tomb, so ended with Ramesses IX or KV6, which thankfully was a lot quieter than many of the other general admission tombs. So if you're enjoying this video, make sure you follow our Virgin Voyages Resilient Lady series, where aside from our stops in Cairo and our sail through the Suez Canal was a true bucket list itinerary, with ports of call in Athens, Santorini, Rhodes, and our cruise ending with an extended stay in Dubai. But most importantly, we please ask that you hit that like and subscribe button so we can bring you even more videos like this in the future. And let us know in the comments if you'd like to see us return for an extended visit to Luxor, complete with a Nile cruise and visit to Abu Simbel. Now ideally we would have liked to have stayed and visited our third included tomb. However, we were determined to fit in one last site which would not have been included in a set cruise ship excursion itinerary. Not far from the Valley of the Kings on the west bank, we arrived at the Temple of Hatshepsut. As aside from being quite distinctly different to any of the other sites that we'd seen, this impressive site was also unique as belonged to one of the few queen pharaohs in Egypt. Now this admittedly was adventurous to fit into the itinerary, but was certainly glad we'd made the effort to do so. As aside from the grandeur of the site, we timed our visit with the sun setting behind the temple, and what a way to end our experience. But would we recommend doing Luxor in a day? Well, we certainly would have liked to have taken our time much more at each of the sites exploring, and of course to see that third tomb we didn't get to see. However, coming from a cruise ship with a 6-hour round trip, we had to treat this as a taster of Luxor with a view to coming back again in the future. So for anyone contemplating visiting from Cairo, either flying down or with the overnight train, or visiting by road from the Red Sea ports of, say, Hurghada, which is an even longer drive than ours, we would strongly recommend doing it with at least one overnight in Luxor to really make the most of your visit. However, for us, the bucket list itinerary on our cruise was a perfect way to explore multiple destinations and determine which ones we would like to go back as a dedicated trip in the future. And despite the packed itinerary, we found our time in Luxor to be quite relaxing and completely different to the hustle and bustle of Cairo.
Not quite the posh lunch I promised you on the Nile, was it?
As Mustafa had kindly picked up some lunch for us for our 3-hour journey back to Safaga.
So, an eventful day, to say the least. Yes, given the traumas of this morning, we actually made a fairly good recovery, though we were getting a little concerned that we would be the pair of pier runners. And again, given that this ship sets off to Dubai for 5 days, there's no way of catching it up. So we'd have been stuck in Egypt. But no, after the confusion with the permits at the port this morning, our guide and our driver have absolutely gone all out to whiz us around everything in record time and get us back on the road. So we're actually back at the ship an hour and a half before last embarkation. Still probably a little bit too close for comfort for us, but you know, that was the price we paid for doing our own itinerary. But I'm pleased to say we've made it, yes. And there she is, she's a bit hard to miss.
So, if like us, Egypt has always been on your bucket list, check out our previous videos where we show you how to beat the crowds at the Great Pyramid of Giza, and of course the iconic Sphinx, before heading to the more historic and less busy Step Pyramid of Saqqara. We address the uncertainty of the move of Tutankhamun's treasures from the original to the new Grand Egyptian Museum, plus visit the mosques, bazaars and markets of Khan el-Khalili in the historic and atmospheric old city of Cairo at night, not to be missed. And lastly, enjoy the unique experience of cruising through the Suez Canal. But if you've enjoyed this video, drop us a like, share with someone who you think might be interested, and let us know in the comments, do you think after watching this you'd be prepared to do an independent tour in Egypt? But for now, thanks for watching and see you again soon.